In this video, I'm going to break down all the major areas of the KTM 85SX, why it may be the worst bike for you, or why it may be a really great bike, based on your specific needs. Wow, it's bright out. Beam me up, Scotty. It has an 85cc two-stroke liquid-cooled engine, which means that it's a race bike that's meant for racing. It has very little bottom-end torque, which makes it really hard to learn how to use the clutch on if you're a beginner or if you're trail riding and you ride at lower speeds, lower RPM. It's very anemic or lackluster. So at lower RPM, it's just blah, blah, blah. And you got to slip the clutch quite a bit just to get going in first gear, so you don't stall it, because it is a really light flywheel. It revs up really quickly and it revs back down really quickly, so it stalls a lot easier compared to a four-stroke air-cooled trail bike. This makes it a terrible bike if you're a beginner or if you're riding tight trails and you want a bike that's smooth and easy to ride, because when the power does come on, when it comes on the pipe, gets on the power band, watch out, because if you're not ready for it, it can really bite you. It's really fun, especially out in the open, or if you're ready for it or you're racing. It has a ton of power for its weight and size, which makes it great for racing, or if you just want a fun, aggressive bike. You don't mind spending a little bit more time and money on maintenance, which I'll get to in just a minute. On the KTM two-strokes, they have a power valve here in the cylinder, which is partially closed, which covers part of the exhaust port in the engine, essentially increasing the velocity of the gas mixture exiting, so you get better bottom-end mid-range torque. And then once it gets to a certain RPM, it opens up all the way like there is no power valve and gives it that good peak power. Compared to like the Honda that doesn't have a power valve, the CR85, it's a more peaky engine. It's kind of more of a light switch where it's either on or off for power, where this KTM with the power valve, it has a little bit more bottom end mid-range torque. It's got full disc brakes, front and rear, and the KTMs come with a V-Force reed cage from the factory, which maybe gives it a little bit more power overall compared to a typical stock reeds. And they come with these nickel-plated pipes from the factory. It looks like FMF or Pro Circuit, but it's just a stock pipe, and they're already tuned for pretty good power overall. If you're going to get aftermarket one, you're probably not going to see much improvement unless you're just changing the power, whether it's more low-end torque or top-end horsepower. So the suspension, it has close to 11 inches of travel, which is great for high performance, for absorbing those huge jumps on the motocross track. The suspension is fully adjustable, so you can change the rebound and compression damping on the top as well as on the bottom here. And what that does is it slows down or speeds up how quickly the forks compress and rebound, which can give you fine-tuning adjustment of comfort and control, so essentially making it stiffer or softer based on your weight and riding style. And the rear shock also has a clicker adjustment here and right here, and you can adjust the preload, which sets the ride height for the shock lower and higher, and that is very critical for getting the proper handling, because if the rear end is too low or if it's too high, the bike is going to be more or less stable and you're not going to have as much traction on the front or the rear. And it's set up for about an 80 to 100, maybe 120 pound rider, depending on how you ride. It's going to feel harsh and stiff if you're riding in that 5, 10, 15 miles an hour over small bumps, rocks and ruts like on trails. It's going to feel really harsh, and you're going to feel every little bump on the bike because it's set up to go faster and to absorb those big bumps on the track. So great for motocross, not so good for trail riding unless you do some major suspension revalve. As far as the size, this is the small wheel with the 17 to 14 inch wheels and tires, which is really good for 11 to 15-year-olds, depending on your height, generally in the 4'10" to 5'4" height range. There's also the big wheel with the 19 and 16-inch wheels, which is better for a bigger rider. It's another 1.5 inches or so taller and can handle obstacles a little bit better. It's going to be a little bit taller than the 125 to 150cc air-cooled trail bikes with the same size wheels because it has more suspension travel. And the nice short wheelbase compared to a full-size motocross bike makes it really nimble, really easy to turn, easy to flick around, and the weight is around 160 pounds, I believe. I'll put the specs up here, but this thing is super light for how much power it has. As maintenance goes, the 85s, they tend to wear out the top ends faster than any other bike because you got to rev them really high if you want to accelerate at all. It really depends on how you ride and how you maintain it. You may only get 5 or 10 hours if you're riding out in the soft sand and you're holding it wide open the whole time. It's going to start to lose compression in a very short time. However, if you're just an average rider and you're doing regular maintenance with keeping the air filter clean, changing the oil regularly, you might get 20, 30, or even 50 hours. And if you're just a casual trail rider, you might get 100 hours on it. The better you maintain it and the cleaner the air is that you ride in, the longer it's generally going to last. And these race bikes have a pretty loud exhaust system compared to a trail bike. So if you're riding in a noise-conscious area where you might annoy neighbors, you're going to want to get an aftermarket spark arrestor exhaust to quiet it down a little bit. And even then, these things are pretty noisy. How much can you expect to spend on one of these? Well, it really depends on the year that you're looking for. The 85 SX didn't change a whole lot from like 2002 to 2013, I believe. So you're going to be looking in the $1,500 to $2,000 range, depending on its condition and your local market. For a newer one, you're going to be spending anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000, depending on the year and the condition of it. And some things to consider when looking at one of these, just want to know that the top end, it's basically a maintenance item. So if it's hard to start or it doesn't want to stay idling, if it's fouling spark plugs, it's probably running low on compression and it's due for a rebuild, which if you don't have to replace the cylinder, it's pretty cheap. It's only about $100 and you can do it in a couple hours with a service manual. But if you want a low maintenance bike that's this size for teenagers, 10 to 15-year-olds, if you're just starting out, I would not recommend these because the higher maintenance, the really snappy power that is hard to learn on the clutch, it's very aggressive and can be very intimidating when you're just learning how to control the clutch and the throttle and just wheelies out from under you. It's pretty intimidating. But if you're looking for a race bike, this is still a great choice because these KTMs, they have a lot of power and they're lightweight. So if you are looking for a first dirt bike for you or your son or daughter, you check out this video here. So after hearing all that, do you think this bike sounds like it's a good choice for you? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Kelly Fager, and I want you to start out the right way on the right bike so you don't get hurt.